What's good, everyone? This is Money Max of Craftmaster Productions, where we make elite music with the philosophy that kids use hacks, professionals use tools. It's been a little while from me. Unfortunately, I've been a bit sick, or as they say in Britain, under the weather. But I'm back. Life is a gift. Music is a gift. Let's talk R&B. So today I wanted to basically show you guys my template in Logic Pro X, because as much as I make samples in Studio One, I love making samples in Studio One. I know a lot of people like using Logic and prefer using Logic to an extent where it's it's worth me showing people how to do the same thing I do in Studio One and Logic, because I started off in Logic. And I'm in London, so everyone here uses Logic. Everyone uses Logic the way Americans use Pro Tools. It's kind of weird. So I'm really quick with Logic, and I understand Logic. I actually understand Logic better than Studio One, to be honest with you. So without further ado, I'm just going to show you. I'm going to take you through my template, show you where everything is, how you can do things like run audio out of the DAW through pedals and effects and all that kind of stuff. And then we'll make a sample. Okay, so here we are in Logic. Generally, just a basic thing. I don't like to have too many instruments initialized when I open up a template, because I don't want it to take too long to load and stuff like that. I don't have the fastest of computers. But soon come. The ones I've got are Analog Lab. I've got two instances of Analog Lab because I know when I'm making samples, especially Analog Lab is kind of the go-to. Oftentimes I'll swap these out for sometimes I'll use a specific one like the OBX, and I'll use an OBX for the entire composition or whatever. And that's kind of like a little hack. Sounds from the same synth tend to go together because that's just how these things are designed. And then we've got Omnisphere as well. Omnisphere is a staple in the culture. I don't have to explain that to you. Now, first instance on every channel is a VU meter, just like in Studio One with what CMP used to do. And honestly, this is a free plugin, by the way, a free VU meter from Klanghelm. It's calibrated to -18, and again, I just use this. You can actually adjust the volume in here as well. I just use this because I know the first thing I'm going to do with every single preset I use is go right into UAD oxide. And as we know, UAD oxide, it's best to hit it at -18 VU in the box for reasons that CMP has ranted about enough. And then following that, we have my AIO. So this is like your pipeline in Studio One. This is like your, I forgot the name of the plugin in Ableton that does it. But basically, this is the plugin that I use to run things out. So in this, I have an output on output 3 and then right back into input 1. I can adjust the volume going out, the volume going in. I can ping to see how quickly my round trip is. So basically, it will adjust for latency as well. I can actually dry wet that too. And if you use this in stereo, you can also use mid-side. But of course, we use mono signals here at Craftmaster Productions because we understand that mono signals are what the greatest music of all time was built on. Now, that's just the basics. So you got your VU meter, you got your oxide, and you've got your IO matrix in and out. Then if we look at the effects, I always have a long plate. So my plate's going to be my longer reverb. I always have a shorter reverb. That's kind of like a room reverb. I'll show you what all these sound like. And then I have two types of delays. So my plate reverb, I've never found a plate that sounds better than this. I do like the Arturia plate. If I pull that up, I do like the this plate. They gave it away for Christmas like 2-3 years ago, and I got it, and it sounds really good. So I tend to alternate between these two, but the UAD one, man, like it just sounds. It's just the sound. A lot of times, what I'm looking for is not necessarily just something that sounds interesting or sounds good. I'm looking for the sound. And when I say the sound, I mean, oh, this puts me in the era that I am trying to sample from or trying to create samples from. So for example, if I wanted to make like 90s R&B, what I would probably use is the Lexicon 480L, because that was the sound of 90s R&B vocals. It was the sound of the keyboards. It was the sound of everything. Same way, this EMT plate, if you're from England especially, and I try and rep Great Britain when I'm doing this stuff, like this was the plate that they had in the Abbey Road studios when the Beatles and Phil Spector and all them lot were recording. The Beatles, you see the poster behind me with Dark Side of the Moon. Like this is that exact plate from that studio. And it sounds like it. It sounds like it and feels like it. And it feels very vintage, and it immediately puts me like in the 60s and 70s. So I like that for vintage samples. My short reverb is this little soft tube one. I think it's free. I don't know. It sounds cool though. I use it on dark mode. I have it on a very short time. Really small pre-delay as well. And this is where me being an engineer kind of comes in, because I've been doing mixing and kind of creativity with effects for a long time. I know how to add effects to effects really well. So for this, I like to dirty up that short reverb a little bit, because that short verb is like a room verb, so it kind of just puts things in a space and widens them out. And then I add this in just because it gives a bit of wow and flutter and dirt and grit. And this is another free Arturia plugin. So most of the plugins I use, or like half the plugins I've used so far, are completely free. But yeah, this is really nice on a reverb. Like I have the wear on a little bit. I don't like the mechanical sound. I don't like the noise. I don't like those things in the reverb at all. Really, I'm giving it a lot of flutter and a little bit of wow, because that will just add to the vintage feel. Sometimes when you can't get an effect to sound right because you have it inserted on something, it's better to put it on like your reverb setting. So for example, there are times when an artist will tell me I don't want my vocals to sound too auto-tuney. So what I'll do is I'll have like a slow auto-tune on their actual vocals, and then I'll tune the shit out of their reverb, and it makes the whole song feel and sound more in tune. And that's kind of like a little hack that was taught to me by one of my friends. And yeah, so sometimes putting the effects on the effects will give you the more subtle, it'll give you the vibe without being too aggressive. For my dub delay, I have, Galaxy Tape Echo, self-explanatory. I have the feedback way up high. I've got a little reverb going into it, 163-ish. I might play around with the echo rate sometimes. But it's pretty self-explanatory, to be honest with you. Then I have this, and all I use is the drive knob. This is one of the nicest saturations that exists, the drive knob on Little Alter Boy, and not enough people talk about it. I use this on vocals, I use this on guitars, I use this on basses, I use it on all kinds of things, because it's a really nice, like, again, it's subtle and it's like crisp. It doesn't just break up and distort. Like, it gives you this thickness and this almost like a toastiness to a sound. And so yeah, I just use a little bit of that on my delays. I like it. Sounds almost like radio warble, which is really cool, especially because another thing I do is I filter out most of the treble on this delay. And I'll play some sounds so you guys can hear what each of these sends sound like as well. Yeah, I'll do that in a sec. And then Dimension Expander, another free one. This is basically the Haas effect. It just widens that sound. Again, like when we're working with mono signals, what I like to do is I'll pan something all the way to the right, and then I'll pan either the reverb or the delay a little bit to the left, or I'll widen out that delay so that it feels a bit more stereo. And these are like classic studio tricks. This is how mix engineers in the golden eras of music that we talk about, the 60s and 70s, the 80s and 90s, this is how they used to do things. Unlike now, when everyone thinks every single signal has to be stereo. No, mono signals and stereo sends. And sometimes I'll even use a mono reverb, but that's a lesson for another day. And then finally, we just have this delay. It's nothing too fancy. I have the repeats kind of up here. For me personally, there's almost nothing that sounds better than a self-oscillating delay. Like a delay that gets to self-oscillation. And if you listen to like the Travis Scott albums and like some of the more creative Kanye albums, like a Yeezus, for example, you see Mike Dean uses that stuff a lot. Like he'll do this thing where like he'll have a vocal or an ad lib and then he'll make the delay self-oscillate on itself and then cut it. And then you get this dead space, and that kind of thing is just so cool and so creative to me. So I love the sound of a self-oscillating delay. And then usually I'll have some stuff on my master bus, but yeah, we'll get into that as I'm making a sample. So let's actually start by let's actually play some sounds and show you guys what exactly it is I do as I'm making stuff. Right, so in Analog Lab, what have we got here? Oh, that's the other thing. In Logic, when you use like your ripcord or your scalers or whatever, what you want to do is you want to come to MIDI effects, and MIDI effects is where you would insert that, and then you can play it like an instrument. So, for example, if I open up ripcord, well, this is something from the Summer Walker pack. That sounds kind of awesome. Let's actually record that. Alright, what's the tempo of that? Alright, so it's like 156. Let's quantize those to eighth notes. Right, so that's a pretty awesome sound in and of itself. Let's see what the VU is saying. Awesome. Now let's program out Oxide. Now with Oxide, I tend to use the CCIR circuit for it does sound different if you listen to them, like, go back and forth. But the reason I use the CCIR is because NAB is based on the American circuit, CCIR is based on the British circuit, and as I said, I'm here to represent for where I'm from. Right, now we're going to go out of the AW through some pedals and some EQs and some preamps, and we'll see what we get. Right, so what I've done with that sound is I've sent it through my Cooper Effects Arcades pedal, out the Cooper Effects Arcades through my Trident equalizer, where I'm boosting a little bit around 4K and a little bit, well, not a little bit, a lot bit around like 8K. And then out of there, I'm going through my physical UAD 710 preamp. I'm driving the tube circuit, so I'm getting some saturation, analog saturation out of that. And then I'm going from there into my Handsome Audio Zulu, using it in mono because it is a dual mono unit. And then out of there back into the box. So here's without that. I'm trying to gain match them so you can see like an accurate representation. If I just crank this for a second. So here's without. Which is a pretty awesome sound, but then you add all this outboard stuff and sounds a bit more brittle, sounds a bit more expensive. I might add some more body actually by bringing in a bit of that 1K 800 hertz region. Bear with me. Right, so I added in a bit of 1K because I wanted to have more body. I didn't want it to feel thin and brittle. So off the strength of that, we already have kind of a really nice sound. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to record that. The way you have to deal with Outboard and Logic is you have to send your stereo out to a bus. So I've sent it to bus 1. And then bus 1 is the input on this recording. And I'm going to literally record it now. Before I do that, let me ping so we get latency compensation. Beautiful. So this should be perfectly in time now. We don't need this. We'll mute that for now. We'll call this keys 1. Now I'm going to show you what some of these reverb sends sound like. So the first one is our plate. This is the long reverb, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn them all the way up and then I bring them back, and then you'll be able to hear what they sound like. So actually, we'll start with our plate. So here, I didn't want it to do way too much. I just wanted it to add a bit of space and staying power, because this is obviously a short sound. The sustain on it isn't very long, so I wanted it to just add a bit of that staying power in. Next, we have my short verb, and this is one I really like. So this is the one where you have the really short reverb, and this is going to put it in a room and make it feel wide as well. Oh, that's the other thing I did on the tape mellow, because I wanted it to feel wide as well. I've also turned on this stereo width thing, and this is a wide now. I'll turn this off and like let you hear just the reverb by itself, and then I'll turn it on and I'll engage the stereo width too. So that's just the short reverb. So short reverb sounds amazing by itself. Now let's add in this tape mellow and kind of see how it sounds when you dirty it up just a little bit. It's going to sound louder as well because I'm driving the preamp of it. So for R&B, I don't like too much distortion. Like I like it, don't get me wrong. Distortion's always good. Distortion's always a fantastic and beautiful thing. But I like to. It needs to be subtle. I don't want it to be like a really aggressive, because it's not. At the end of the day, we're not making rap music here. So I just want it to kiss the red. I don't want it to be breaking up too much. So that's what it sounds like with and without. Let me A/B it again. So this is without, and then with. So you can hear it's just adding a little bit of wow and movement and wear and tear and all this kind of stuff. Let me even crank the wow knob just so you can hear. Just adding to the lo-fi-ness of it, and I'll do the same with the flower. So it's very subtle, but it's really nice. It just gives it this movement and this vintageness and that vibe that we're all looking for, basically. And then what I'll do is I'll turn on the stereo width thing. Just widens things in a really nice way. All right, let's turn off that reverb. It's a whole different sound now. Let's turn it. Let's blend in some of this. So you see how even though we have a mono signal, this doesn't sound thin in the slightest, right? Let's bring in this delay now. And honestly, these plugins aren't doing that much, so I'm not gonna go in as much depth with them. I'm just gonna show you how this sounds. But this is legit just a delay, taking out a lot of the treble, taking out a little of the bass, cranked up the feedback because I love a self oscillator, cranked up a bit of the reverb, and it sounds really nice. So again, basically what I'm doing is all of these plugins, especially the UAD ones and anything that is basically modeling vintage, the most important knobs in all of those plugins are your input knobs, because your input knobs, how you drive it, is where you're going to get the character of the plugin, the character of the sound. Same thing with Outboard. Like the whole reason we buy Outboard gear is for the input knobs. The way you drive the unit is going to determine how much of the character you get. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm basically playing around with the input knobs, so I'm not getting too much distortion, but it is just kissing the red, because that's all gonna add up to like saturation and thickness, and it's gonna make the sound richer and more depthy, basically. Now this is where the drive knob. So we'll see how much drive we need to. this, I'm actually not going to use the drive knob at all. Because I'm getting enough of that drive and saturation from the input knob of this. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't. And then I mentioned expander again, it's just going to widen the signal. Like, you see how just immediately it widened everything. Okay, so that's dope. So if we add back in, well, if we add back in our other effects, and then we'll peel this back with the delay. So what we've got now is a sound that's sitting in a really nice space, and none of the effects can be heard specifically or individually too much. But if you take them all away, you have nothing. Like, it's a completely different sound. Sounds dope, but doesn't sound as good as this. And certainly doesn't sound, this certainly sounds better than this. This is how we start to build a bit of our own sound, because no one's ever going to listen to this sound or this preset in Analog Lab and be like, oh, Money Max obviously took that preset. Now I've created something that sounds similar and it's inspired, but it's different, and people are going to wonder, okay, how did he do that? And I'm kind of giving you guys the answers now anyway. But with this, I actually might use this in mono. Let me use the delay in mono, and this is kind of a longer delay. I'll turn it all the way up. I've turned off all the other effects. Let's just listen to this. So as you can hear, it's not super fast. I've turned the bass down a bit, and I've got the repeats quite high. Repeats is your feedback, because you want it to feed back into the delay. That's how you get that self oscillation. So when I'm adjusting the feedback knob, I'm basically always trying to figure out how much of this can I get away with, because more is better. Like, more is more is just always objectively better. And I'm kind of a rebel in that way. So, and then because it's in mono, what we can do is we can pan it, and this is where you start to get like, oh, this is what back in the day these engineers used to do. Well, I'm not sure what's happening now. But this is what these engineers used to do. So they'll pan sounds all the way to the right, and then pan like a delay all the way to a little bit to the left, or they pan a throw or something all the way to the right. And now you've got this situation where, oh, if I pan a sound all the way to the right and then I pan the reverb return to the left, now it sounds like something with dimension. But I still have enough space for a vocal. I still have enough space for all the other instruments. I've still set a sound stage that makes sense. So again, let's bring back in our other effects, and then we'll mix in this delay, and then we'll kind of call it a day. I'll finish the sample kind of off camera and show you what I end up coming up with. But yeah. So yeah, that's my sample making template. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you found it useful. I hope you learned a little something about effects as well. And you're going to see me making a lot more content in this template